All right, First Samuel 6. Let's call this one Uncertainty and subtitle it Coincidence. Meaning, the Philistines, having captured the ark, are now going to wonder whether or not the misery that has come along with it is just a coincidence or if it is really a plague that has come from God. And that coincidence question seems to break down into two sub questions, and that is similar to what Israel has asked: why has this misery come upon us? And how can we make amends for it, as we mentioned in the last chapter? Except the Philistine why isn't going to be kind of a clueless why. It's going to be like, okay, how can we go about confirming that we're just not making this up in our heads because our misery is that great? See, they already have an indication that every town the ark has gone to has been especially afflicted. So they're not deluding themselves as to this being a random occurrence. But to make sure, they want to go a step further, and that goes into the how. Okay, how can we approach this in a way that will help us to understand, one, if this is really from God, and two, if he will really remove his hand from us, understanding this passage is going to use the metaphor that God's hand was heavy upon the Philistines during the time they had possession of the ark. And so, in order to get him to potentially receive their request for mercy, if this is from him, they're going to give a guilt offering that is surprisingly accurate, considering Israel's laws of sacrifice for a guilt offering, which, apart from a sin offering, had to come along with restitution, meaning it's not enough that you just sacrifice something. You have to restore what it is that you either damaged or stole. And so they are going to, as we saw in the last chapter, resolve to send the ark back to its place, but they're going to do it in a way that would require divine intervention so they can get their why question answered. So in other circumstances, it might not be permissible to just let it go on its own. But one of the reasons why the guilt offering is so important is because they want God to show them whether or not he was really involved. And hopefully, if they offer a proper sacrifice with the proper restitution, he will accept them, simply sending it back and letting it find its own way back to God if it really is his possession and his hand that is punishing them for keeping it. And so they offer the guilt offering: 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, symbolizing the plague that was on them, along with the ark as restitution for what they took. And as it goes back, they are going to see that it goes straight back to the Israelites, in many ways answering their question and giving the Philistines at least this much credit: they didn't delude themselves or gaslight the nature of their true problems. Understanding that I've heard it preached, when God puts you in a tight enough squeeze, the truth will pop out. So any tendency we have, as we mentioned in past chapters, to gaslight, which is to pretend that the truth isn't staring us in the face, often becomes a lot less appealing, meaning the gaslighting becomes a lot less appealing the more God puts the squeeze on us. And so, like we often say, my prayer for you is my prayer for me, that God not have to put the squeeze on us to get us to acknowledge the truth of the things that we're doing that are standing in between us and healing, understanding that even the Philistines, people who are not God's people, are having their prayer heard to the degree they once again acknowledge that they're not going to get their prayer answered on their own terms, which is why we often say God's best to you as you go forward in him. Once again, hopefully not seeking God's help in vain.